When I'm talking to sellers and people that we're involved with, they are growing their business, but now they want to make a big jump. Someone who's wanting to go to Mexico doesn't need to go and figure out the legal, the logistics all themselves. You got to find the people who you can trust, find a turnkey solution or partners on the ground. Today, we've got Ramiro and Mike from GoAvance. They are doing something really unique. You know, who's talking about South America like these guys are, and who've got real experience down there. Welcome, guys.
Thanks.
Hey, Richard. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us, Richard.
Yeah, appreciate you guys taking the time. So let's just kick off. Like it's such a unique business you got. You didn't start off here. How did you guys build up to GoAvance, and what brought you here?
I had a very interesting upbringing, and I think this was kind of the background. I had a very interesting upbringing. I was an expat sort of nomad family, where like we were going from one place to another, 10 countries before I became even like a real adult. And at some point, I went, you know what, I got to move back to Mexico, and I moved back to Mexico. And at this point, I'm an engineer, and like I'm not an engineer by my personality, by anything, but I come back being an engineer. And I started looking for engineering jobs, and everything sucks. And I just started sending my CV blind, and it lands on Mike's desk. So I come in an interview, and he obviously saw the incredible potential in this young man. And he brings me on for his business, Agency Advisors, and then he has me. I become an expert in all things Amazon and e-commerce over the next 4 years-ish. Until we started looking, we were going back and forth about like, we can't buy this in Mexico, and then clients going, hey, let me expand to Mexico. And it sort of just happened where we looked at each other and went, why don't we help people get into Mexico? And him having this traveling background and being an American national, and me having this traveling background and being a Mexican national, it kind of felt like a very natural fit to go, okay, well, let's shake hands across country lines and help people come in. Absolute hubris, absolute downfall. Icarus flying too close to the sun to be where, we're PPC nerds, we're marketing nerds. We can figure out logistics. So it's about, I can import. Yeah, sure. Regulations, easy. Spent about a year just tripping over our own feet, tied our shoelaces together and all that. And then when we got it working, it's like, hey, this works. Let's go to market. We came to market, and we've been very happy ever since.
I think that's a pretty good side of the story. To give my context on here, yeah, obviously AMZ Advisors was the first business I had. As Ramiro mentioned, we hired him as an employee, and then as we kept growing, we saw the opportunity. And one of the reasons that we saw opportunity, at least from my perspective and that of my other partners who are also American, living in Mexico, is that the product selection or product availability in Mexico is very limited. When I go to Amazon, when I go to any platform, I don't have as many options as I do in the US of what I can buy. And that just seemed like something that didn't make sense. I mean, we're so close proximity-wise. There's so many more brands, so many more options in the US. So yeah, we started looking into how we could solve that as a problem for Mexico. How do we get more brands down here? And from originally as a marketing agency, the idea was, how do we help them on Amazon? And then we realized that most of these brands can't even get into Mexico because of legal restrictions. So we can't do any marketing, which is kind of where we evolved on the current model we have with GoAvance.
And to be clear, you guys both live in Mexico now, right? But you serve all your clients. I know, Mike, you still got the AMZ Advisors business. So you're serving, all your global clients and all the US and everything for the Mexico business. But both of you are based in Mexico now. Like you're locals now, right?
Oh, I mean, Ramiro's much more of a local than I am, but yeah, we're both here in Guadalajara, Mexico. We've been here. I've been here since 2017 at this point, so it's been quite a long time. I think Ramiro got here around the same time, so yeah.
Yeah, I've been here, I think, 8 years. Yeah, and obviously, I was born here, and something about coming back just sort of feels like home, even though, you spend your whole life abroad, you come back and you're like, no, this fits right. This is the culture that my mother had in our home, and like sort of this sort of stuff. So yeah, I would consider myself a local, even if sometimes I speak like an alien because I have some English words in my brain.
And it's quite an interesting thing, right? So how did you land up actually even seeing the Amazon space? Like Ramiro, you spoke a bit about that. But Mike, did you kind of wake up one day and go, "Oh, I'm going to try out Amazon"? How did you get into this Amazon space to start with?
So a long time ago in a past life, I started as an Amazon seller. This was back in about 2014. I was working in a corporate job at the time, and I really didn't like it. I wanted to do something for myself. I was just kind of looking for a way out, and what it started with was actually selling ebooks on Amazon. We learned, myself and my other partners learned we could sell ebooks on Amazon, so we started making a little money that way. Then we kind of got into retail arbitrage, going to the local stores and buying everything on clearance and then selling it on Amazon. And then we realized we could just build our own brands by importing product from China. The first time we did that was 2014. We built an art supply brand. We also had an outdoor goods brand. And at the end of the day, it didn't end up working out. We learned a lot. We made some good money from it, but we realized that we were really good on the marketing and sales side and not so good on the logistics and inventory management side. So we took those skills and started applying them to help other brands. And we got some really big brands early on, which helped us learn a lot more and move a lot faster. So we were working with brands like Plackers, Neff Headwear, Burt's Bees, a lot of very well-known brands in the U.S. And we saw the growth that these brands were getting, and that's kind of where the Amazon opportunity opened up, where AMZ Advisors kept growing from. And then as we actually were hiring our first account managers here in Mexico, one of them was Ramiro. And then from there, we've just kind of continued to find new opportunities in the e-commerce and the Amazon ecosystem.
So let's jump onto the why. Guys, when I'm talking to sellers and people that we're involved with, a lot of them have reached this mark of hitting 5, 10, 20 million. Some of them are thinking about private equity or other investors. But they're battling to grow from 20 to 40 or 50 million just organically. So let's assume someone's just selling in their American market. They got their kind of core set of products. They know how to sell on Amazon, and that's what they do. The question is always like, how do you jump from the 20 to 30 or 40 million? There's a couple of options. The way I kind of ask guys to do it is, could you actually just sell more on the channel in the geography with your current products? If that's starting to scale out, well, now you got to think, can you add another sales channel? Can you add Shopify? Is there another sales channel, big box retail? But could you also just do more of what you already know, but in a different geography, right? Of course, the third option is adding products, but then you got to go back to ground roots testing. So what I love about what you guys do is you're doing it in a way that the founder, the seller, doesn't need to take their eye off their core American market that they're still trying to maximize. South America, before meeting you guys, I hadn't really thought about it. Guys were just adding it on their, Amazon Seller Central and trying to ship from Texas and hoping for the best. Tell me a bit about the why, because that's quite important, right?
Listen, I think the why is something I consistently ask myself. Why, whenever even content making, anything that we're doing is why would someone want to do this, right? And that's sort of like the mindset that you have to have. To us, there's a couple of different reasons. One is sort of the place and the lifetime that Amazon is in Mexico. Amazon, Mercado Libre, like marketplaces in general, it feels like still like the Wild West. Like Mike said, he launched a brand in 2014 and he saw that boost, right? And he was like, oh, this is skill based on one hand, but on the other hand, a very inefficient market is the way I would put it. I traded for a living for a couple of years in the crypto space, which I'm not proud of, but I learned then that inefficient markets are the way to really make big leaps in a short amount of time, right? So, that's on like the very, let's call it technical side, is it's a very inefficient market where there's not a lot of players. It's we do get first mover advantage, amazing. And every brand that we're working with is coming in and going, oh, there's no real competition, amazing. And they get to then position themselves to grow with the market as the market grows. On the other hand, we're looking at macroeconomically, Mexico looks fantastic and is, really looking to keep growing for the next 10 years in a way that is very encouraging for us. On the very sort of real side, like I am Mexican, I live here, and I can't get, like Mike said, I can't get access to the products. I think a lot about the economy being people's lives, and the same way the sentiment being people's lives. So being here, talking to people here, and seeing the change between, I lived UK 2012, we were already ordering everything on Amazon. Hey, we're out of sugar. Hey, it gets here tomorrow. To come in here and having people go, but does it actually get to your house? How do you know it's not a knockoff? And I was like, oh, we're back in time. And it's something you just feel when you're talking to people, that it's like, oh, this is the moment where shoppers are becoming digitized. And there's no real index. Of course, you're going to see market penetration of e-commerce and all that. What you feel when you're speaking to like my friends, to people, here in Mexico is, oh, this is coming. Oh, like you get a message that goes, hey, I just ordered on Amazon for the first time, from someone that would like ask me for help to, hey, can you order it to my house? It makes me go, okay, all right, this is happening. And obviously I don't have access to millions of people. I have access to like my 4 friends or whatever. But that feeling that is here is is intangible, but it's also the main reason that I personally believe brands probably want to be here.
I mean, I think I would add, I think the analysis that you kind of gave at the beginning of the question, Richard, I mean, looking at different opportunities of where you have to grow. When you're expanding to a new market, like Mexico, like Brazil, whatever it may be in South America, all of those growth strategies that you named out, channel expansion, selling more, improvements, like all of that is a possibility when you enter a new marketplace. So a great example of this is in Mexico, you might launch on Amazon, or you might already be on Amazon through the NARF program, shipping from Texas, like you said. Your conversion rates are going to be low. We have done this before. We've brought brands in that were doing that, and their conversion rate goes from 1% to 10%, pretty much right overnight. So that makes a huge difference. But you also might launch your brand in Mexico, and you might find that Mercado Libre is a better platform for your product. Or next week here in Mexico, TikTok Shops launches. Maybe TikTok is going to be the right platform for your product. So there's so much evolution and so much opportunity from a growth standpoint of where you might be able to launch and where you might be able to see success. And I think that's another big one. Obviously, growth rates, when we look at Latin America, Mexico and Brazil are top 5 in worldwide growth for e-commerce sales. So just there's so many reasons from my perspective of why brands should be here. It's just a matter of dealing with some of the hurdles that I'm sure we'll talk about a little later of actually being in these marketplaces.
So you've got a situation, a market that's growing. So we actually don't know what the real size of the market is because it's changing month to month, right? Which is exciting. But you've got the inefficient market where you just haven't got any competitors, right? So you're coming in, if you're selling a supplement, chances are no one else is selling that supplement. Versus in the US, everything's a commodity, right? Everything's commodity priced. I do like the idea as well of you get both the geographic change, but also a separate sales channel, right? So just talk me through. So I know Mexico's kind of where we're spending most of our time, but you've got the size of the Mexico market. Brazil, I know Brazil's got, last time we spoke offline, Brazil's got its own set of challenges, which we'll get to. But what kind of market are we looking at? Maybe South America or only Mexico? What is the market comparatively to the US? Have you got some numbers on kind of rough estimates that you could throw out there?
Yeah, I mean, we do. It's tough to give it an exact measurement, but if we compare it to other marketplaces, First of all, to start with the largest marketplaces in Latin America, Brazil's number one, Mexico's number two. Beyond that, Colombia's number three. Then I believe Chile and Argentina are after that. So those are kind of the orders of magnitude on where you're probably going to see the most results fastest. When we look at market size or sales size, what we see in total e-commerce sales in Mexico is about the equivalent of what you would see in the UK on Amazon or in Germany on Amazon. So those markets are pretty comparative. Brazil's about 50% of all the e-commerce sales in Latin America. So when we look at the Brazilian market, we're looking at markets that are comparable in size to the UK, to Germany, to the other European markets in e-commerce sales. And the other interesting thing we see is that moving beyond Mexico, there are already a lot of local brands in market in those countries that are very sophisticated when it comes to e-commerce. So there's a whole different level of sophistication than what we see in Mexico in particular. But the foreign brands have not found a way to break into those markets. So those markets are still highly dominated by local brands. And there's actually a high preference for foreign goods. So it's kind of a win-win. I mean, you have a good size market, you have demand for foreign goods, and you have a market that's pretty much restrained to local competition. Foreign competition coming in is just going to pretty much blow the lid off of things.
And you've still got a big buying power, right? So Mexico, Brazil, very difficult to compare anything to the size of the purchasing power of the US. But if you compare it to the UK or European markets, there's a lot of wealth in those countries. There are big populations, a lot of wealth sitting there.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. People think of Mexico and they immediately think of that lower purchasing power, right? And it's like, can we come in? What we've consistently found is if we come in with cheap items, we're actually not, it's not working. It's not, and what the hypothesis that is working for us currently is the segment of the population that isn't cash-based, that is digitizing their shopping habits, that is, perennially on like TikTok, Instagram, is probably higher average purchasing power. So we're actually leaning on that quite a bit to go, listen, private label, like cheaper, like commoditized items, it's not going to work. Like it really isn't going to work. Anything that we can target, sort of like we even go like geographically, if we can target certain areas of like where products would be bought, we are seeing much better results that way, which, was a surprise to us at the beginning. And as soon as it happened, we went, oh yeah, that makes sense.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, you've got markets which are similar in size to a UK, for instance, but it's an inefficient market with very little competition. So obviously it's not going to be like that forever, but you can probably get similar top line number of sales, but possibly, if you know what you're doing, much higher margins in that space, right? And that's why Mexico is also geographically, if you're selling in the US, it makes more sense to send your goods, across a border that's by truck or train rather than put it on a ship and send it to Europe. Because I know we're going to talk about the challenges in South America, but Europe's no walk in the park either, right? From an importing and compliance perspective. Would you say, last one on this point, would you think of Mexico as potentially a more profitable investment opportunity than the UK for most sellers, or is it more nuanced than that simple statement?
So the one thing I'll say here is we are really aiming to lower the investment not only in capital but in time and inventory, right? Like it makes there's three things that I'd have to think about: how much money is it going to cost me, how much inventory am I going to have tied up, and how much time is it? The opportunity cost of time. How much do I have to focus on this? Working, and this isn't like a GoAvance plug. This is like working with someone that really knows what they're doing is going to lower one, two, or even all three of these, making it easier. When I've tried to help brands expand into Europe, it has been very difficult. Now, granted, that was before a couple of things, before some VAT changes, before having all this experience in expanding specifically to Mexico, which I'm sure is very translatable. But what we are finding is that it kind of feels a little bit more profitable in that way, because it feels like we are lowering the investment and, just easier.
Advertising costs in general, they're a fraction of what we see in the US. They're a fraction of what we see in Europe as well. And I mean, that's one of your biggest determiners on Amazon. A lot of that comes from a lack of sophistication, specifically here in Mexico. There's a lot of brands, as I mentioned, like most of the competition is local competition, and a lot of these brands are just starting to adapt e-commerce. So they're not aware of they need to run ads. They're not aware of how to create the correct ad strategy to be successful. So in a way, brands that have that experience, or brands that work with a company like ours that have that experience on managing millions and millions of dollars in ad spend in the US, know exactly what to do when we come in the market, and we become much more efficient. The costs are much cheaper. The cost per clicks are literally a fraction of what we see in the US, especially in highly competitive categories. So yeah, it can be significantly more profitable down here.
Yeah, it's exciting, and it's there's kind of two things that I've seen where people are selling across border from the US. I know there's a specific kind of strategy and plan for that. You mentioned it a couple of minutes ago. I've just gone blank on the name or what that process is, or what that plan is. What's it when we're selling from the US across into Mexico without having local presence?
NARF.
NARF. That's it. Just what is NARF?
Yeah.
And because I must admit, most guys I see are just doing NARF. They're just selling from their US across, and then they're like, oh, they're not getting great results in Mexico. But you're not in Mexico. You're punting it across the border. What's the opportunity between NARF versus what you guys do is go in and sell from inside Mexico or inside Brazil?
Well, there's a lot of different things we do here. I mean, obviously the first one I mentioned was conversion rates. When we look at the conversion rate difference between the NARF program and actually selling in market, when your inventory is in market, conversion rates are significantly higher. That is the first big advantage. The second advantage is actually from the tax standpoint, and this is relatively a newer change in Mexico, but not only when you're selling NARF, previously Amazon wasn't collecting some of the taxes, the income taxes that sellers were responsible for. Now, and Ramiro can correct me if I'm wrong here, Mexico is going to be collecting income tax on all the sales that are coming cross-border, which means it's going to be about 20% more expensive for brands. The other thing that is not really considered by the sellers is import costs. So good example I always give here is I bought a monitor on Black Friday a few years ago, a computer monitor. I bought it from the US thinking I was getting a great deal. It cost about $100. It was a 32-inch, really nice monitor. But when it arrived, I had a $100 bill on import costs that I was not expecting. So every savings I made was gone. That's one thing that the sellers don't see that the end consumers have to deal with. That's a very big challenge, which is part of the reason why the conversion rates are so low, and one of the reasons that we're able to help brands be more successful in that we reduce the actual end cost to the consumer or minimize it as much as possible to make us much more competitive in the market.
And then you can price accordingly, right? So if you're selling that same monitor for 130 versus from within Mexico versus 130 across the border, it's still cheaper for that person to buy it at 130, and you make that extra $30 profit, right? Yeah, okay, that's great, cool. So look, big opportunity, and I think there's going to be with all things big returns. There's going to be some big risks, and we'll get into that in a second. Cool. So what I'm liking to hear is that there's a real opportunity. Mexico, hypothetically, a lot more profitable, potentially, than the expansion to Europe. Where there's kind of reward, I think there comes great risk, and I think you guys have seen a lot of that. But just before I ask you about the risks that you see, I just want to help people understand that there's different ways to enter a new market. Whether you're going to the UK or to Mexico, you can sell on something like the NARF program, export from the US. Generally, the consumer's having a terrible experience. They're getting customs duty. They're getting hammered on some type of tax when the product enters the country. And also shipping is going to be slow. Specifically the guys who are shipping to the UK from the US, right? I think shipping times to Mexico are not going to be great, but they'll be better than shipping to the UK. But Then there's kind of two options, and you guys provide an interesting option. Someone who's wanting to go to Mexico doesn't need to go and figure out the legal, the logistics all themselves. Finding a turnkey solution means that they can limit the amount of time and energy that they're putting in, right? And I've just seen that specifically with clients going to the UK, and I think it will hold here, is people we've worked with who go to the UK, they mess it up, but it's not really the money they lose, it's the time and energy. And then they just give up and they just write off the inventory, and they end up with a tax bill, and they pay 20 tax lawyers to register them for VAT. And versus, I like what you guys do in terms of a turnkey solution, in that you guys got the local skills, man. Like, no one else is going to figure out how Mexico works in 6 weeks, right? Are those a good three kind of ways to think about it? Ship cross-border or not, try to do it yourself at your own peril, or find a turnkey solution or partners on the ground. Those are the three options, right?
Yeah, by the way, I love at your own peril. Like, that's just like, beware. I would say the other one, which is a traditional distributor, is the fourth one. And honestly, this is a huge part of why we like what we do. Is as a Mexican living here, I understand that, all right, I want to look at a different country. I want to look at expanding. I don't know what that reward is going to be. So I have to risk accordingly. Right. And it's like you said, it's money, it's time, it's the headache. And sort of like the thesis of what we've been doing is, all right, listen, we can help maximize your chances of the upside, but the upside is a complete unknown to you as someone that isn't in the country. How much can I help by lowering the risk? And we're just fixing the same ratio. You can either move it up, or you can move one part up, or you can move the other part down, right? So, and we were also taken for a ride when we started, which is something to remember. I think you both like saying, learn from others. Wise people learn from other mistakes. We actually learned from our own at the very beginning. And it was a lot of, hey, this person says it will do it, and then they didn't. And then it's, hey, the government has this time frame, and then it never did. And then someone saying it has this regulation, and then you bring it, and they're like, actually, it was this one. But it's like, but this person, there's a lot of know-how that sort of needs to exist to do things smoothly. And know-how is not only, how things work, but also like how things work officially, but how things work unofficially. The faux pas that you may make if you're like calling someone, if you're trying to speed something up, if I'm trying to pressure someone into having something on time, it is done differently in the US and in Mexico. Like, these cultural differences are also part of what keeps the machine running. And it's something that, it's very difficult to quantify and to figure out.
So Ramiro, there's a lot of cultural things that can go wrong, which can get very expensive, right? So I think it's just interesting. I love your guys' humility that you're talking about the mistakes you made. And it's not just about, you guys arrived on day one, you were perfect. Like getting this right in Mexico is difficult, right? Right from bringing the product across the border, getting the warehouse set up, getting ready, getting it into FBA. Culturally, these things, if they go wrong, they cost you a small fortune, right? Mike, have you got any thoughts on that?
I mean, yeah, I've experienced this in a variety of different ways. Obviously, with AMZ Advisors, we grew a lot of our team down here in Mexico, so there were a lot of different learning curves there, and different expectations. I think that's the big thing, especially as a foreigner being in a different marketplace. The way that you expect things to work in the U.S. are not the way that things work in Mexico. And I think that is a mistake that I constantly find myself making, and that I am constantly complaining to my Mexican wife about. I'm sure she loves it. But yeah, no, I mean, you kind of spoke to in the last question of like the different ways. I mean, I think the different ways of expanding, and I think, the cross-border can only get you so far. What you really need in any marketplace, I think, is a local provider, a local partner that really can help you navigate the different challenges you're going to find. I mean, when I was opening my business here, I relied on local lawyers. I relied on local accountants, everyone to kind of explain the laws to me to make sure I had the right understanding. And that's just from the legal and fiscal perspective. When it comes to consumer purchasing preferences, marketing preferences, the way we're producing content, all those types of things. The way that customers shop in Mexico is different than the way customers shop in the US. So these are all different factors that have to be taken into consideration when you're expanding to any marketplace. And even differences between the US and the UK shopping, that's things we see all the time. So it is very important to kind of go down that route.
So if we had to say, what are the things that you've seen either yourself or your customers have as the biggest destroyers of profit? So not understanding the local culture, I'm assuming that works into like, man, I messed up. I thought I was getting this price from a warehouse supplier or a shipping company. Is that fair? Like, that's a big eater of profit. I'm sure taxes have got to be a mess as well, right? Like, because
Yes.
it's not, taxes are not, you're not jumping on Google and getting a simple understanding of VAT and import duties. Are those two, would you say those two kind of drivers are the big profit destroyers?
I mean, Mike, I'm sure we have different perspectives on this. I want to hear what you have to say, but on my end, from the operations side, I'm seeing taxes being 100% the number one profit eater, especially with the new regulations in 2025. We predict we're going to get a lot more messages of them going, hey, I just got hit for, because this happened to us, by the way, already. Hey, I got hit with a tax bill that's bigger than my entire profits for the year. Please help. And you go, that's what happens when you do things the wrong way. There's everything from tax retentions to not declaring properly. Even if you're trying to do things the right way, where do you get all your deductions from? We have we have a firm that just has to do this every month constantly. And it involves everything from digital invoices to chasing you up and going, hey, do you have that piece of paper that you used, however long ago, to make sure that we're actually doing things properly? And to add to that, it kind of feels like not even the marketplaces themselves know precisely how to declare their taxes and their sales in Mexico, because again, professionals that have dedicated their lives to this will disagree on how things are done. So we've gotten to points where we just say, listen, we're going exactly by the book, by the law of the book, and we're following it to the word. And if anything is wrong, we're really outside of any sort of liability, because it is so slow. It has been so slow to modernize that process for the Mexican authorities. So we have people. Hey, I paid an importer and it cost me $2 per unit to get it into the warehouse. First, you're going, whoa, that's insane. Like, that's a lot to just get it in. And none of it was tax deductible because I'm not set up. They got to deduct it from their taxes. And you have to know your way around these things, or it will absolutely eat into your profits.
And so just like, Mike, maybe you can talk to, I just want to ask a quick question. So like, when guys are expanding to UK or Europe, it's just you take your LLC, you get registered for VAT in UK, and off you go. But it sounds like in Mexico, and I'm assuming in Brazil, etc. as well, you actually need a separate legal entity, and you've got to pay income taxes in that country. We're not just talking VAT, which has got its own challenges compared to sales tax. So we've got the VAT and import duties and that kind of stuff that you might miss. But then you also got to have a separate set of accounts and the legal entity and income taxes there, right? And like, that could be a whole dark hole of a mess.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, yeah. Those are all big problems here, and like, just from a time standpoint, Ramiro's the one that deals with this more on the operations side. But the amount of time it takes going back and forth with the fiscal authorities, with lawyers, just getting stuff done. I mean, just to get a tax ID in Mexico is a nightmare in itself. You have to know who to talk to, where to go to. Like, all of these different challenges are time consuming, but they're also costly. Another good example here is when we look at taxes, to give you the actual numbers. There's a variety of different tax regimes in Mexico. When you are registered correctly with the tax authority, your income tax rate can be, I think, about like 6-7%. It's generally pretty low as a business. When you come in here as a foreign entity and you don't have a business set up correctly, your tax rate's 20%. So like, that's a very big difference right there. Another big cost center for a lot of brands coming down here is having the wrong partners. I mean, Ramiro briefly touched on it, but he didn't really highlight the dangers of gringo pricing. When you are a foreign coming in trying to do business here, companies are going to charge you a lot. I mean, we've seen bills for 20, 30,000 when it costs like $1,000 to do something. So if you don't know what you don't know, that's a big profit killer. That's a big risk that you're running as a foreign entity trying to get in here. And that's really where we are able to help brands avoid a lot of those pitfalls.
I remember, I mean, this was years ago. Mike and I had just met. He hadn't been that long in Mexico. Like, I gotta go get my car washed. And he went, "Oh, go to the place down here. It's only 600 pesos per." And by the way, like for the US, you're hearing $30. That's not a lot. For Mexico, it's like 600 pesos to get your car washed.
Yeah.
Oh, they're, and I show up and I came here to get my car washed. They go, "Yeah, 125." And I go, "All right, you're not. You cheated my friend out of out of those dollars."
Yeah.
And this is just something that you culturally, I think we know. Like, we'd also do the thing where like, I need my phone fixed. All right, give it to me. I'll take it to get fixed. To get around these, let's call it surge pricing. Let's call it variable pricing.
We've got this. I think Europe's got the same problem in terms of there's a foreign tax, right? You're the same accountant to get
Exactly.
your taxes registered is going to charge you an extra 40% because they know you don't have a choice, right? But what I just also find interesting is that you do find a cultural difference. I have it in the UK, the US. You kind of go to the guy in the shiny suit and got the big letters outside his door, and you think, I can trust him, right? Well, you probably can trust him to give you a big bill and talk a lot, but not necessarily get it done, right? So I think finding operators and people you can trust, that's just a business principle, I suppose, that's the real trick here. You don't need to be the expert. You got to find the people who you can trust who've done it. And what I do like about what you guys are saying is you learn from your own mistakes, right? You felt real pain for yourselves getting these things sorted out over years. It's not like you started this 6 weeks ago. How long does it take to actually get in? For someone to come in and get set up, how do they think about budgeting? Obviously, each business is going to be different, but should they be going through a process of understanding like this could take a certain amount of time to get the infrastructure set up? And how, like, will you help them? Do they need to come up with a budget for that? Because it's not just, the shipping cost, the inventory cost, and what you're going to spend on ads to break into a new market. Now you're going to set up a whole new legal entity. You've got to make sure all the accounting and taxes are set up. And there's quite a big cost that they wouldn't normally think about, right?
Yeah. I always like to talk about this, which is like, all right, don't work with us. Like, let's see how we're going to do this, because ultimately it's what everyone should know when you're looking into a country. Like, I'm okay. I'm going to depend on you, but also like, if I didn't, like, what would that look like? So in Mexico, you need a Mexican legal representative, which is a Mexican that will be here and will be the face of your business in terms of going out, signing things, acting. You need a designated general manager for the company, which traditionally is the same person, right? Written into the certificate of formation, escrituras for us, or acta constitutiva. Then you're also going to need a warden or overseer, which is a position that makes sure that fiscally you're not cheating and they're liable for that. Okay. Then you're going to need monthly tax declarations. You're going to need someone to bookkeeping in general, but compliant with Mexican standards. All right, cool. Like, we're getting up there with the amount of people that we were supposed to have on file. Then from there, you need to come down to Mexico to set up your legal business entity. That is a process that has to be done in person. Like, it's insane to me. Like in the US, it's I went through a Delaware website and I had it in a week. And here's like, well, no, you have to fly down, you have to sign, or give a notary power of attorney to someone to sign for you. Okay, it's as you can see, it's now going. Do I really want to do this? And then it's, hey, we need apostille documents from every partner in the LLC, or if you're like a single person, like apostille documents that prove who you are, your tax returns, all ran through a notary. It's a stack of documents about that thick, DHL to Mexico. So we can spend then the next 8 weeks putting together the certificate of formation, which for us is literally, I think it's like 60 pages. Like it's a considerable, sizable document, and then come down and sign for it, and then start. Oh, and then you have it. Now figure out how to deal with the tax people, the IRS. For us is set. Figure out how to deal with them. By the way, it is super unfriendly, all in Spanish. And let's call it murky waters when it comes to their processes. I'll tell you, like regulations changed this year. We opened a legal entity this year. They said, you need to come back. So here you go. You have a tax ID. You need to come back with proof of address to this business name. And you go, well, excuse me. Any proof of address is going to take about a month. Any bill I'm going to get, any bank account. Oh, I can't open a bank account if I don't have. It was a loop where you couldn't do it, and they went, by the way, you have 3 days to declare your taxes, or you're going to start incurring fees. You go, excuse me, and it's sort of that where if I wasn't here, and if I wasn't Mexican, and if I wasn't going up and going, all right, come on, how do other people do it?
So if a seller's thinking about they're starting to max out their US growth, thinking about the Mexico plan, it's not just inventory, not just advertising budget, right? There's an infrastructure cost that they got to put aside. And how long is a piece of string? I'm sure you could probably have that from, I don't know, I have no idea what that costs, 3, 4, 5 grand to get the basic legal stuff set up. If you go to the wrong people, you could be paying 20, 30, 40,000, right? So getting that done correctly, but also at a cost that makes sense. But you've got to factor that in and think about it as a return on investment calculation, right? Same as if you're buying a property, there's transfer duty, or there's real estate agent fees when you're buying the property. You got to capitalize that in when you're thinking about the return on investment. So that gives a lot of clarity. I know we're working with a client together on one of these, and I've just been blown away by how much admin there really is.
There really is a lot. And like one of the things that I always preface this conversation with, we're talking about Mexico specifically right now. And it is very time consuming, as Ramiro can speak to get the business started. When we look at like the ease of doing business globally, like Mexico is number 60, which is not great. But when we look at other countries in Latin America, like Brazil's 125 or something. So if we're talking about how difficult it is in Mexico, only imagine how much more challenging it's going to be for you when you look at other countries in Latin America.
So the opportunity is big, but the cost is real, right? Like if you don't do the homework, you can lose your shirt here. And the detail on both the cultural, operational side, the legal, income tax, and then you got VAT. And I know Brazil's taxes are like make Mexico look like a walk in the park. I've done some business in Brazil. I'm a finance guy. I didn't know what was going on with the taxes. Stuff is insane. The reality is you guys end up paying for yourselves pretty quickly in those opportunity costs. And the cost isn't just the money, right? So like, fine, someone spends 10 grand more than they should on the wrong lawyer or accountant. The real cost is that they took 8 months to get trading, whereas they should have got trading in a shorter period, and all that lost profit, right? And there's always a risk that someone else is going to get there before you, and you've got that first mover disadvantage now that someone else stole from underneath you. What's the feel on the ground there? Has it increased? Are you feeling more positive about 25 than you did 6 months ago? How are you guys feeling about 25?
I don't think it's going to have any impact at all. I really think a lot of this is overplayed. I think the challenge will be the U.S. brands may have more challenges at some point dealing with production and manufacturing in China than they would ever have here in Mexico. I think what we'll expect to see is more brands looking to move manufacturing into Mexico, which is only going to give them more of a justification of being in Mexico. And the other good point here is that it's still pretty easy for us to bring product from China to Mexico, which makes it another shortcut for a lot of brands. So overall, I'm pretty positive. I don't think there's going to be that many impacts. Ramiro may have a different opinion than I do, but I'll let him go.
No, I'm actually quite positive too. Honestly, I look at the current instability as a dampener. But I think it's a dampener on a runaway train. So it's like, you know what? Like, sure, let's plan for it. Let's get ready to maybe import direct from manufacturing. Let's get ready to be nimble. I think a lot of what we're looking at is we have to be on our feet, and just be quick to act and figure things out. Have the right contacts. Hey, how has this changed? So on the Sunday that was quite, ooh, what's gonna happen? What's gonna happen? We have the type of relationship with our importing uh, customs broker that I just straight up got to call him on a Sunday evening and go, hey, what's going on? How is this going to change? And there was none of this, oh, well, I'll get back to you. I'll email you in 2 days. He was like, honestly, this is probably what we'll have to do, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, okay, cool. We're set. Like, let's keep going. Lawyer, hey, how we doing? No, we're probably good on this one. Okay, cool. Like having the right mentality and sort of looking at it as, well, whatever the problem is, this is a big enough train that we're just going to have to keep riding it. What do we have to do to make sure it keeps happening? I think that's been really changing, because I was quite on Sunday, I was quite just upset. And then I went, wait a second, everyone's going to have this problem. And culturally, you're not going to grow a homegrown brand that is going to compete with what you're bringing in, over the next 2 weeks, month, 2 months, immediately pop up. So we're probably safe. How do we navigate it? What's our game plan? And just plan for that. We immediately started going, hey, we need to be set up at every port. Wherever you manufacture, east, west, wherever, we need to have someone there that we trust, that we can receive product from in case of any shifting environment hurting our processes. So, quite positive. It just, the good outweighs the bad monumentally, at least from the macroeconomic landscape here. So.
Guys, I spent over a decade doing investment banking, international transactions, right? And I'm seeing the market as super positive, but getting more complex, which makes me excited for anyone who's willing to learn how to deal with the complexity. So if you can learn how to deal with the complexity in Mexico, you create almost like a monopoly, because there's all these barriers to entry now, right? I think you guys are well positioned for that. But for sellers to jump in, take the risk, spend the time, but do it with someone who knows what they're doing. Again, if you're the first longevity supplement brand to really get going, selling a whole bunch of product there with a strong brand to the upper market, like for someone else to catch you now, they're not going to just be online in 3 weeks, right? The amount of work they have to do to figure out how to get into that market, that takes them 6 months, 8 months, and they got to learn a lesson. So I'm kind of excited for guys who are willing to take the leap into new geographical regions because of the complexity. Because if you get it right, you've got this little barrier to entry, which I'm super excited about. So, but you get it wrong, you're going to lose, that inventory ain't coming back with profit on it. So. Right, guys, the thing I like to end off, a couple of quick fire answers, some personal ones. First one up, what's your favorite KPI or metric that you think is important for a seller or a founder to think about?
Unanswered emails. There's one. How low can I get that number? Because it's the direct metric not only of how on the ball I am, but also how focused am I to where I have time to get to everyone. Yeah. How much is the business running well? Well, then I had time to answer emails. Is the business running inefficiently? You know what? Those are piling up because a lot of my time is looking at something else. So unanswered emails, to me, like the absolute metric of how well I'm doing.
Yeah, that's spoken like a true ops guy, right? I mean, I'm expecting gross profit margin or ROAS or something. Yeah, I like it though. Story of my life. I'm stuck in an email box that haunts me 24/7. Yeah. Mike, you having the ANZ side, you're going to have an interesting one. What's yours?
Well, from the agency side, obviously retention is a very big KPI that I rely on to make sure that my clients are sticking around, that we're happy, that we're providing the best service. I think for sellers, you briefly touched on it, gross profit margin is probably the KPI that I think is most important from the selling perspective.
that's the one they also get the most wrong, right? Because gross profit, a lot of the guys are just using their buy cost, not their landed cost. I spoke last week to Mark from Sellerview, and man, like literally an hour and a half of Mark talking about the pitfalls. So sellers just don't do it right. So they just ignore the inbound shipping and customs, and that's the stuff that you'll eat you alive in Mexico, right? You get your inbound VAT and import duties wrong, and you're selling everything at a loss. That can be brutal. Cool. Biggest mistake, a personal one would be great, or one that you've seen a customer make. What's a useful one?
My favorite mistake is this ever. And by the way, favorite in the way that like it actually haunts me to this day, was going through every regulation possible, making sure everything's right, and then the last thing is when they labeled expiry date, they labeled month, day, year. And it came to Mexico and everyone went, this is expired. You're selling me expired product. That to me ranks amongst the top like historical, just looking at it and going, oh, come on, guys. We were so close.
That was brutal.
That's definitely a good one. The one I have is how I lost my first brand. I was selling art supplies, and we were scaling up nicely. We had to find a new manufacturer because our old manufacturer couldn't meet the output, and we reached out to a different factory in China. And next thing we knew, that factory in China was producing our product and selling it on Amazon, and we had no supply. So they completely put us out of business. That was a tough one.
Yeah, I've actually come across quite a few people having similar issues at the moment, especially in the US. Seems that there's a lot of the foreign suppliers just listing their own products now, right? I've had a couple of conversations this last month, people experiencing that. If you could go back in time on that one, Mike, how would you have mitigated that risk? Have you got any thoughts? I'm sure you've had some long nights thinking about that.
I have thought about that a lot, and honestly, like I think the only thing I would have done different was maybe go, instead of going directly to a factory, I probably would have tried going through a sourcing agent, or a contract manufacturer that might be a little bit more trustworthy. That's the only way I could see avoiding it. But yeah, that wouldn't hurt.
I think this one talks for itself, but obviously, favorite sales channel. What do you bet the farm on if you got to choose a sales channel to grow a business?
And so I'm going to speak specifically for Latin America. I will go Mercado Libre. Mercado Libre is in a very interesting spot because it came. So in Mexico, we're in a very weird spot where Amazon comes north to south, Mercado Libre comes south to north, and we're the last people that anyone ever thought of. So market penetration is much higher in Chile, in Argentina, in Brazil than it is in Mexico because we're the forgotten ones, right? So when looking at Latin America as a whole, Mercado Libre just has so much presence that to me it's going to probably be king for the next 10 years in South America.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm obviously an Amazon fan. Being from North America, making my entire career around e-commerce so far, Amazon has been pretty rewarding for my clients and for me. So.
And you've been around long enough to see the full kind of journey, right? Guys who were a couple of years ago, plenty of people I was talking to were doing clean kind of retail arbitrage strategies, and the world of Amazon's changed a lot, hey, Mike?
Yeah, I've been selling since 2014. I've been an agency since 2015. Everything has changed in that time period, and it keeps evolving faster and faster. It's one of the cool things is like staying on top of it and seeing what's working and trying new things to get ahead of the competition. But it is not as much of a cakewalk as it was back then.
I agree. Like the margins, the good brands, if you're adding real value, the good brands are succeeding. Everything that's average is getting strained, right? So last quick fire, your favorite accounting or tax hack, if you've got any.
Honestly, what's working for me in Mexico that we love is follow the law to the letter. Because what we're facing in this moment, I mentioned it earlier, is, hey, this should be like this, And then the accountant's going, yeah, but they want this. And we're like, okay, we got around we added a couple zeros to our bottom line. Amazing. Like, cool, let's do it. Like, that so far has been really, really nice. And we're hoping that at least 2025 carries through in the same manner.
As someone who's been in accounting for a long time globally, like I've been an audit partner, I've done all the boring stuff, right? Like spreadsheet jockey. It's so interesting how the kind of more developed world being like USA, UK, smaller business has a lot more freedom. Like the book is a lot more like simple in many respects. Everyone moans about how complex US and UK is. It's really like, it's actually simpler. But the kind of less developed, I'm originally South African, right? So South Africa and Mexico and Brazil, so many similarities. There's this like a black and white approach. And if you get it wrong, there's like devastation versus, and the amount of rules for small business is just insane. If you don't do it properly, it's much harder to do business in Mexico, or Brazil, or South Africa than it is in the US, right? But you'd think it would be the other way. You'd think less developed economy, it's the Wild West, you do what you want. Not a chance, right?
Exactly. It's just like, and even like we had to consult with other accounting firms and be like, hey guys, like, and everyone just went, this is right. And we went, okay. We love it.
Yeah, I would say something similar to what Ramiro's talking about. I mean, one of the things that I mentioned earlier on is that my strength has always been sales marketing, not the inventory management piece or inventory planning. And what we do here is a combination of consignment and distribution. We're purchasing brands and selling them down here in Mexico. And managing cash flow is something that has been a learning curve for us. It's something we're learning to do better and better. But because of different tax loopholes and other things we've taken advantage of, we made about, like $50,000 more than we thought last year. So that was a nice. I wouldn't call it a hack, but it was something we weren't accounting for that actually worked in our favor.
We were storing it away. We were like, okay, we're gonna have to pay this at the end of the year, like the income tax, or we have to pay it at the end of the year. And then our accountants went, hey, the government owes you money. And we're like, are you sure? They're like, yeah.
That is beautiful. Ramiro, Mike, thanks so much for spending so much time. We've taken over an hour of your time. I really appreciate it. Guys, you're doing something really special. It's really interesting to hear this Mexico. We didn't talk too much about Brazil. I'm sure the war story is even more extreme. But I'm very keen to get a final thought, final bit of wisdom from you. What's your favorite wise quote, Mike?
And this is kind of paraphrased, I think, from Charlie Munger, but wise people learn from other people's mistakes. And I think that's incredibly important, is that we've made a lot of mistakes on our own. We could have been smarter about them, but everyone we work with now essentially has the advantage of not making the same mistakes that we've made before. So that's a good one.
Yeah, and you can't put a dollar value to that. Well, you can, because you guys knew how much all those mistakes cost you, right?
Yeah, we know what they cost.
Yeah, and it's also the time and effort, right? And I think, Ramiro, you spoke about that earlier. Someone else goes make that mistake, they don't generally take it as school fees and try again, they give up, right? So then the real cost is they've given up on Mexico, given up on the whole South American market. So guys, you're doing something special. I've learned a lot from today's chat and our previous conversations and some clients that we share. I think it'll be really important to have someone understand what would make them be a really good client fit for you as GoAvance, where you could add the most value. What's a good client look for you, and how does someone bring everything to the table to make you help them help themselves?
Well, I'll go ahead here. Look, the brands we want to work with the most are the brands that are growing significantly well and looking at new opportunities for growth. They've kind of maxed out their growth in the U.S. market. They're looking for expansion. Many of the brands we're working with are private equity brands, or are getting to that point where they're looking at selling to a strategic investor. Those are the brands where we can immediately provide a ton of value and really get them up and running quickly. That is probably the first thing I would say. Other brands that are trying NARF and have seen any success, North American Remote Fulfillment again, those are also really good brands for us. Like I've mentioned in an earlier example, we can take a NARF brand from 1% to 10% plus by bringing it in country. So if you're seeing success on Amazon in Mexico through NARF, you're going to see even more success when you work with us through Amazon, Mercado Libre, and the 7 other platforms that we're going to get you onto down here.
Awesome. And if someone, how does someone get hold of you? We'll obviously put a link down below. How does someone sign up and get hold of you? What's the waiting period? Do you have like a backlist? How do they get in touch and get working with you?
Yeah, the best way to get in touch with us is either directly at the website, GoAvance.com. You can also send us an email directly at info@GoAvance.com. Those are the 2 best ways to get in contact with us. And we're constantly evaluating brands. I mean, we're not going to work with everyone. We want the brands, like I said, that have the best opportunities for growth. We're glad to set up a call and discuss whether your brand is a good fit for Latin America and whether this partnership could work well together.
Yeah, and from personal experience, seeing how you guys are looked after, people we work with and I work with, it's a rare circumstance to see people that actually take action. There's a lot of guys talking. So I can't recommend you guys highly enough. And I'm also excited about Mexico and Brazil. The size of the market is tough as it is. I think the whole of South America is in for an exciting couple of years ahead. So thanks for your time, and we'll finish up there.